Hi, everyone. My name is Larry Veilleux. This is the third posting in my Fresh Look At series. You can find the other posts on my LinkedIn page. This one is different since it is not discussing any automotive concepts. And as you will see as I go through this journey, it is based on my lifelong experiences. Using these principles, once again, I was able to transition myself into an automotive cybersecurity career. As I take you through this journey, I will expose you to the things that mattered the most to me. I hope that you can learn something from this too. Imagine being called into battle, and after landing your armada of ships on the shores, your commander orders your troops to torch the ships. Now, why would you do that? Well, it's all about commitment. And in this case, the ultimate commitment to either succeed in your conquest or die. I suppose you don't need that level of commitment to succeed in life, but it illustrates a great point and one that I followed recently in my personal quest to become a well-known and respected leader in automotive cybersecurity. Folks, you need to be willing to make a commitment and see it all the way through, no matter what the obstacles might be. The biggest obstacle being yourself. I have had a long career in computer networking and more recently, network testing and assurance. Of course, I've practiced the principles discussed here throughout my career, starting from when I joined the US Navy back in the Ronald Reagan years. And that most certainly was a great time to serve our country. Well, I suppose any time is. Unfortunately, in January of 2023, I lost my job of 24 years, which forced me to do some soul searching regarding how to proceed. As a result, I spent time examining my options. Do I stick with computer networking? Do I stay in professional services? Do I continue as a manager or go back to my technical roots? Do I stick with training, which is my claim to fame? Or do I return to my roots as a system engineer? Well, earlier in the year, I had a conversation with my friend Abby Thorat, the CEO of SAC. Abby encouraged me to investigate transitioning to work in automotive cybersecurity as a consultant and trainer. And after 9 months of research, and for the most part, retraining myself, I am now at the point to where the results are starting to materialize. Now the sky is the limit as I continue down this road. I am really excited about the automotive industry and specifically automotive cybersecurity. To be honest, I was getting burned out on what I was doing before. So now I'm excited to be doing what I like. That especially includes training myself and others. It has been an interesting ride. So as I started, I had been blessed this year to have the opportunity to focus on learning while retraining myself in automotive cybersecurity. As a result, I wanted to share my efforts and strategies with everyone. My hope is that you'll get excited too. But as you embark on your journey, I want you to remember a quote from a fictional character nonetheless, Yoda in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, when he said, "No, try not, do or do not. There is no try." You should know that to try is the lowest form of commitment after all. To begin with, realize that we all have a similar starting point, which is our previous knowledge and experiences. And of course, after a long career, I had plenty of that. But I want you to realize that I do not have a photographic memory, even though those that know me often think I do. Rather, I must research and read things multiple times from multiple sources for it even to start to sink in. Through this process, I always take everything with a grain of salt, meaning I don't believe everything I see or hear, especially if it is from a single source. Personally, I have always been self-taught, for the most part. Okay, that may seem to provide me an edge, but know that if you follow the concepts that I am discussing here, you can have that edge too. Learning on your own takes a firm and ongoing commitment where you don't have the structure and deadlines of, say, attending a college or university. But where to start? I remember hearing evangelist Dr. Robert Schuller state many years ago, beginning is half done, meaning whatever you must do, just do something. Do you have an essay to write? Get out a blank piece of paper and jot down whatever comes to mind. Don't worry about formatting, structure, or even if the thoughts are seemingly random. Just remember, beginning is half done. For my journey learning automotive cybersecurity, that just meant opening up a browser search and following where it led me. We are all fortunate to have the internet these days. Speaking of the internet, gee, what did we do before we had the internet? Well, from my recollection, yes, I started my career before the internet was mainstream. We had two choices, physical medium and physical interactions. I mean, virtually is a fairly recent thing. The definition of virtual is not physically existing as such, but made by software simulation to appear to do so. So what kind of software did we have in the 1980s? Well, DOS, if you even know what that is. Before the internet, physical medium consisted of libraries and books. We had to go to a library or bookstore or rely on outdated dictionaries or encyclopedias. I remember I used to love going to San Jose, California. I lived in Southern California at the time, and this was the closest technical bookstore to me, even though it was 300 miles away. Some of you might remember it was located on North First Street and East Trimble Road, which is now the home of Silicon Valley Center. And we didn't even have Amazon to order from. So these were most certainly was all we had, and many were out of date by the time we even received them. Physical interactions means we learn from listening to or watching our family, friends, and mentors. Of course, if we went to school, we also had our teachers and professors. And from them, we learned by listening, watching, and even doing. Doing if labs were available, or even through on the job training. Of course, these things are still available today, but nowadays we have almost everything mostly at our fingertips. Okay, that's great. But what do you do with all the information, platforms, and such available today? It always helps when you're learning something to have some context about it beforehand. To illustrate, my granddaughter went to soccer camp before ever even playing. Then, after playing one season, she went back again. It was like night and day how much she received from the second camp after having played already. For me, if I'm going to attend a seminar or a training session or something new to me, then I will study it before going to the class. While it might not have made too much sense to me studying it beforehand, I found that pre-learning something really helped me to understand. I like to say you don't know what you don't know. Sounds a little cliche, I suppose. Okay, well, I can take that one step further by also saying knowing a little more can actually be detrimental. What do I mean by that? Take it from the famous Greek philosopher Socrates, who said, "The more I learn, the less I think I know." Or, "The more I know, the more I realize I know nothing." This phenomenon is also referred to as the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is a cognitive bias in which people with limited competence in a particular domain overestimate their abilities. Have you ever known someone like that? You see, we all go through phases where you first learn something, perhaps on a limited basis, but that little bit of knowledge provides us some level of confidence to proceed. However, as you learn more, you digress into a state where you feel like you know almost nothing, or where you know what you don't know, and that leads you to panic, which is a tendency then to underestimate your ability. But don't let that make you give up. Instead, you need to push yourself even more to continue on your learning path. Easier said than done, I suppose. But if you do, then you'll transition to a phase where your confidence continues to grow. Remember what our friend Yoda said, don't just try, do or do not. This is true for many aspects in life. Then at some point, you transition back to high level of confidence, which may actually attribute to stunting your growth. I know it all now, so why am I still trying to learn? As a trainer, I have discovered the way to get over that hurdle is try explaining what you've learned to someone else. You don't need to be a teacher, and they don't need to be your pupil. Just find some willing ears. So I then proceed to try and explain something to someone else. Through this process, unfortunately, you will be unpleasantly surprised at how much you don't know. Remember the Dunning-Kruger effect? So I have a modified version of the statement I made previously. You don't know what you don't know, and you find out when you try to train or at least explain it to someone else. You see, when you speak something out loud to someone, you go through a process of connecting your brain to your tongue. This is very helpful and as I mentioned before, continuing to research and finding multiple sources of the same information and going over things again and again and even again. While this next statement may relate to a physical capability, it can also apply mentally. I like how ex-San Francisco 49er quarterback Steve Young, my favorite quarterback, put it as developing reflexive recall, meaning you can do or recall something automatically without even a thought. You can develop reflexive recall by doing the same thing or something similar again and again. That's why in football, repetition is paramount. Here is another example of reflexive recall. And as I will discuss subsequently, the power of thought or not. I belong to a stand-up paddling or SUP crew. And as you can tell, we paddle miles out to sea. Quite often, the conditions can be rough, riding up and over swells, as well as heavy surface chop. Not so much here, except for in the smaller insert. We do it so much that it hardly requires a thought. However, the moment you start thinking about it is typically the moment you're going to get wet. I once had an epiphany that confusion is a byproduct of learning. And what is our tendency to do as a result? Sadly, it is to give up. Don't give up and give in to that feeling. You see, if you're not confused, are you really learning anything? And of course, confusion makes us all feel uncomfortable too. At this point, be strong, push harder, and eventually you'll enjoy the reward. I like how the famous Major League Baseball player and coach Lou Piniella put it. You have to learn how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Just remember, confusion is a byproduct of learning. If you're not confused, you're not learning anything. And to a certain extent, learning is supposed to feel uncomfortable. Now you're almost there. Just a few more insights about things to consider during your journey to a greater knowledge and the application of that knowledge to your career, or really anything in life. When I joined the US Navy, I went through boot camp in San Diego, California. Adjacent to us, which we had a clear sight of, was the US Marines boot camp. While we were shining our shoes and strictly and precisely making our beds and folding our clothes, we would see the Marines doing calisthenics and everything physical that you can imagine. I was confused as to why they were working so hard physically and we were not necessarily. So I asked our company commander why. He stated that in the Navy, we are responsible for complex systems that, if used incorrectly, could even lead to death. Sound familiar, my fellow automotive enthusiasts? So they were more interested in changing our mindsets to pay attention to every detail and leave nothing to chance. So I suppose making our beds to very specific specifications help to ingrain that philosophy in our heads. And I have carried that through with everything, well, most everything throughout my life. Now, when talking about learning, test taking also comes to mind. Most people just take the test, not knowing that some strategies can be applied to help with successful completion of and passing the test. So let's say you have to complete 50 questions in 30 minutes. You should start by answering those questions you are sure about first, and perhaps skipping those that you don't know and coming back to them at the end. Following this process, you may be able to complete, say, 30 of the questions confidently in only 15 minutes. Now you're feeling good and have more time to think about those questions you didn't really know at the end. Keeping in mind, too, that previous questions may help provide some insight into those questions that you weren't so familiar with. The opposite would be to get stuck on, say, question 3, and then find yourself in a pickle with only 10 minutes left to complete the other 47 questions. Lastly, when in doubt, go with your first thought about what the correct answer is. That is the power of your subconscious mind. By the way, if you write quizzes, understand that the point of the quiz question is to make the learner feel confident with what he's learned so far. You should not be trying to trick unless you're just mean. Even when you're writing a certification exam. Yes, I know there are exceptions to this, but just as a general rule. Speaking of our subconscious mind, consider this. Have you ever tried to remember something, but no matter how hard you try, you still cannot? Well, my advice is to stop thinking about it. An interesting example is when I spent all day troubleshooting a complex network issue. I finally gave up and left the site about 8 p.m. As soon as I took my mind off it and drove away, the solution popped right into my head. And there are many times that I would remember something or resolve an issue while I was sleeping at night. Crazy, but true. As a final thought, let me say something and be perfectly clear. You have spent a lot of time and effort into learning your trade. One thing most people don't know or think to do always is to take pride in themselves. Life is difficult, and you can go a long way towards protecting yourself against burnout by taking pride after every accomplishment. Of course, don't go overboard with that, and quite often keep it to yourself. I hope you learned something from this presentation, and I do thank you for taking the time. If you've made it all the way through to here, it means you are committed to your success. Take pride in that and really everything that you do. And lastly, since you did stick around this long, a bonus tidbit from an automotive cybersecurity specialist. Don't pair your mobile phone or use the USB port in a rental car. I look forward to meeting you someday.